What's up, y'all? If you're planning to go to Finovate Fall this year, you're going to want to listen to this episode because we've got Greg Palmer on the line, who is the MC and Fintech coach for every showcasing Fintech at the event. Now, whether you are a banker or a Fintech, we're going to talk through both experiences and how to maximize the ROI of going to this show. Now, it's an investment to send professionals into New York, and so you really want to make sure that you've got a plan, and we're going to unpack the playbook for anybody who's going. Now, if you stay to the end of the show, we've got a 20% discount code for anybody looking to attend. Check out the interview. So, Greg, walk me through the spread of financial institutions and fintechs that are showing up. And I'm curious, is there any intention behind the breakdown that you guys have set for the show?
Yeah, so from a really high level, we've got a wide variety of banks, financial institutions, I should say, coming from a lot of different walks of life. We've got the top 20 largest banks in the U.S. by assets under management already coming to Finovate Fall. We're now working on getting that next 20. We love to see these big players in the room. We also love to see these smaller community banks and credit unions and kind of everywhere in between. So, we've got content that's designed for all different types of financial institutions, whether you're mid-tier or huge or community focused. And, to answer your question, is it intentional? Not necessarily. I memean, to some extent, we just want to be where people come to look for fintech innovation. So these are the folks who tend to raise their hand and say, hey, we're looking for help. We tend to be a little bit reactive to the industry in this area. We kind of see who's coming to the event. And then as we get a sense of the groups who are coming, we'll try and adjust content for them. A really good example here, the credit union spotlight that we started a couple of years back was a direct result of just seeing a lot of inbound interest from credit unions. We had more credit unions register for our fall show than we had traditionally. And we kind of thought, okay, this is cool. How can we give them something that's going to make it really interesting for themselves? And so we started talking to some folks in the credit union space and realized that we could kind of pull some companies together that are focused on credit unions. And we just created this session as a direct response to the number of registrations we had coming from that CU ecosystem. So that tends to be how we kind of look at it. We certainly hope that we're pinging everybody and all different types of financial institutions. But as these FIs come, we respond and we try and make sure that everybody has something that they can take away. And most importantly, is some sort of community that they can find at Finovate. Obviously, fintech is a big space, but if you can find your people, it feels a lot smaller. And so that's what we try to do at Finovate, is just give everybody the opportunity to find their people.
That's awesome, because when you find your people, you're able to have really valuable conversations that are tactical and meaningful because you guys are trying to solve for the same stuff.
Yeah. And one of the cool things about Finovate is the collaborative atmosphere. Obviously, these people are competitors, right? A lot of these banks are competing with each other. A lot of the fintechs are competing with each other. And there's that undercurrent for sure. But I'm always amazed by how willing people are to share and to talk about big picture things. And so, even if you're sitting across the table from somebody and you know that you're going to end up fighting for customers down the road, there's still this willingness to kind of talk through, what are you doing? What's working? How can we collectively try and solve some of these big challenges and ultimately make the industry as a whole better?
I love that. That's awesome. And it's great that you guys have got the big dogs coming out as well, because everybody wants to see what they're doing and learn from them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and the honest truth is, if some of these big guys make a move, it's the equivalent of a tanker in the ocean, right? So these big ships sometimes take a while to turn, but as they do, they create ripples, they change other shipping canals. And so, as these big banks do things, as these large multinational service providers do things, the industry has to respond to that. Even if sometimes that change is slow, it's still something that everybody needs to know about and be aware of, because there's a lot of responses. And the big people, the big companies, I should say, really have the opportunity to change the way fintech works. So that's absolutely a key component of the equation as well.
So that takes us into the next topic I wanted to talk with you about, because there are some pretty seismic changes happening right now and just in the industry at large. And I think that's also showing up in what you guys are doing agenda-wise. So agentic AI is all over your guys' agenda this year, which I think is very appropriate. And there's a full panel on it talking about the transition from theory to pilots. And you guys have a keynote for agentic AI for banks. I'm just curious, how are you seeing AI pitches land differently now than years past?
No, it's a great question. And so, I mean, the industry's been focusing on AI for at least the last 3 or 4 years, some people even longer than that. 4 years ago, getting up on stage and saying, hey, we're an AI solution, kind of automatically gets you a little bit of extra attention. Now we're in this situation where it's so ubiquitous. So many different companies are using it for so many different things that it's almost becoming a point where it's like the internet, right? We use the internet. You don't say, I'm an internet banking company, right? I'm an internet app. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like the internet
You'll
isn't
age
what you
yourself
do.
if you do
It's
that.
the means. Exactly. So like AI is becoming in the same way where, it's not, I'm going to say something that everybody has to have, but it's to a point now where that's not enough anymore. You can't just say we're working in AI. You have to give something else to the audience. And typically, they're in a position now where they think, okay, well, what are you doing with it? I don't care how you're getting to where you're getting, but I just want to make sure that we're going someplace I want to go. So are we talking about engaging customers more fruitfully? Are we talking about operating more efficiently? Are we talking about staying compliant in these really complex and shifting situations? All of these things are things that banks are trying to do. And there's things that AI can be really helpful in doing. And so now the conversation isn't, are you using AI? It's, what are you using AI to do? And I think this is a really healthy place for the industry as a whole, because, it's not enough to just say we can do, this technology exists. We're playing in this technological space. Your customers don't care. A bank's customers don't care what you're doing on the back end. They want to get the service that they expect. Whatever you need to do to sort that out is fine. I don't need to see it. I just want to have a certain experience when I come to your webpage, when I open your mobile app, when I talk to your folks on the phone in the branch. All of these different pieces are the end, not the means. AI is potentially a really useful means to get there, but it's not the end all be all goal. And now we're starting to see a maturing of the space. We're seeing companies who are using AI, using it productively. Agentic AI kind of gets a lot of fanfare because it's so visible, right? These are the things where you see chatbots, you call into a system, you talk to an AI agent. We all have this kind of experience now. I think one of the reasons that we focus so much in the agenda on agentic AI in particular is because there are actually quite a few pitfalls around it. And so it's not the case where you can just say, we've got this new AI agent, job done.
Yeah.
There's more you have to do. You have to think about it strategically a little bit more. And so that's why we've dedicated so much time in our agenda to it, because it's a conversation that really needs to happen. And there are people who've learned a great amount about how to do this and do this well. And we're fortunate that some of them are willing to get up on our stage and share those experiences, because ultimately there's a lot of places where you can go wrong. And if you do agentic AI well, there's a big benefit to it. But if you do it wrong, you pay a pretty heavy price for it. Mm-hmm. So it's an area that you really need to focus on.
I think that's great. You guys are putting emphasis there. And obviously, I think your audience is going to get a lot of value from it. The other thing that I always have to remind myself, when I'm looking at my own operation and how I'm doing things and using AI, it's so complicated, and there are so many tools, and kind of figuring out where one tool begins and ends and then bleeds into the next one is challenging and difficult. And when you're a banking institution and you're trying to lean into these tools, the complicating factor starts becoming very fractal-like, because you have regulators that are looking over your shoulders as well. And so, I think it's hard to experiment with the technology without a little anxiety. So, having some guidance there, having some experts up on stage, I think is going to be really interesting. Let me ask you about stablecoins. So, stablecoins, tokenized deposits, that's also getting its own keynote and slot at Finovate Fall. So, you guys are framing it as a strategic playbook for banks. Is this a new theme showing up in demos that you guys are working with startups on, telling that story? Or is this still pretty early?
Yeah, so I'm going to go into the Wayback Machine, because we first saw stablecoin on stage a million years ago when a little company called Ripple debuted at Finovate, back before cryptocurrency was a thing. They were on our stage demonstrating how they were using these tokens to facilitate cross-border payments. And that was kind of my first exposure to this. If you want to go even further back, the initial kind of cryptocurrency, the initial stablecoin is actually World of Warcraft gold, right? This is this video game currency that existed, and there was, but anytime you have this, scarce commodity within the context of the video game, there was an exchange rate. You could buy World of Warcraft gold for US dollars. And you just had to trust that the video game was going to manage it for you. There was no bank license. There's nothing going on here.
Right.
But people were spending a lot of money to boost their World of Warcraft characters. And one of the ways you could do that is to buy artifacts or to buy gold in the game. And so when people start talking about cryptocurrency as being, this really new idea, certainly what we're doing with it, blockchain technology changed a lot around how we look at it. But this concept of tokenization of assets has actually existed for a while. I love it because it starts to pull at some of these really big threads. What is currency? What is a dollar, right? What these kind of ideas that you grow up thinking, well, a dollar's a dollar. I got a dollar bill. Maybe now you start to think about it in a different way and start to look at currency in a different way. So for me, you think about how does a bank necessarily need to play in this space? Again, I come back to this question. What are you trying to do? What are your customers asking you for that you're not able to do yet? And can some of these tokenized assets help you do that more efficiently? Can they allow you to offer a service? Cross-border payments is a great example that it would be difficult to offer when you're taking a fiat currency into another fiat currency.
Right.
And so right now we're in the similar kind of position where early on there's people, I can make a crypto coin, I can make your own coin, I can create a USD coin and tie it. Those inventions are set now. And so the question at this point is, what do I do about it? And that's exactly what that session is aimed at, giving banks an understanding of what do you need to know in this space and what do you kind of not need to know, because there's so much information that from a bank standpoint, a lot of it just gets confusing. It becomes overwhelming and you miss an opportunity. In many cases, the opportunities themselves are more simple than you think. And so part of what we try and do, not just in this area, but across the board at Finovate, is to demystify these conversations surrounding these technologies, to make it easy for somebody to understand how to use them, how they could use them. And so from a demo company standpoint, this is one of the things that I talk a lot with them about is how do you make your technology seem simple? How do you make the folks on the other side of the conversation understand at a really big picture, here's the value that you're creating. Here's why you would engage with me. And in many cases, the answer lies not in talking more about it from a technological standpoint, but more from a how is it useful standpoint. And so I think that's the conversation that really needs to happen right now. There are some people in the space who've got great ideas about how we can use some of these tokenized assets and how you can make investment easier. You can allow fractional ownership of, large real estate properties, all these types of investment classes that
there's
had traditionally been out of reach for people.
Yeah.
And so now you can start to play in that game. And if you're a bank, you can offer your customers things that you've never been able to offer them before. And that's really cool. But before you can do that, you need to know a little bit about the space. You need to understand a little bit about the opportunity. And again, there's experts who know this stuff. And what we do is really simple. We just put the experts on stage, put those guys up there, give them a microphone, and then let the audience just respond to hearing some of these folks who are substantially smarter than I am talk about some of these things.
That's awesome. So, obviously Finovate is a wealth of information for the attendees and a huge opportunity for the showcasing sponsors and fintechs that are showing up there. Let's talk a little bit about maximizing your time spent there. So if a banker is coming to Finovate for the first time, what should they have lined up and kind of clarified before they show up?
Sure. No, it's a great question. And we love first-time attendees. And obviously, some element of the show is simply, some of the value in coming to the show is simply just seeing all the innovation, seeing these companies on stage. And in a period of 3 days, you get this download of here's what's coming out of these fintech companies. Here's where the industry is creating new stuff. And then here's some ideas from these experts around how you can take some of those innovations and put them into practice in a way that lines up with your own strategic goals. So at a really high level, I think one of the best things a company can do, or a banker specifically can do coming to Finovate, is to have a good understanding of what it is you're hoping to accomplish. I mean, you can come to Finovate, you can watch the demos, you can just kind of kick the tires and say, I'm just going to debrief when I get back and we'll talk internally about these are all the different things that I saw. Here's what we might want to consider for our product roadmap for the future. There's value in that for sure. I think more value comes from when you show up at Finovate with an idea of, this is our strategic goals. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Now let's take a look and see who's building in this space, who's creating something that can potentially do this for us. Now that said, one of the things you want to try and do is balance out that idea. Coming in and having a good understanding of what you're looking for allows you to be really productive. It allows you to set up some meetings ahead of time and make sure that you get value out of the event. That said, it's also important to be open and be receptive, because what we see a lot of is companies who get up on stage and really shape or cause banks to rethink how they're thinking about something. And, the banks that are open to these new innovations, who have their radar up and are looking for opportunities, tend to be the ones that capture those opportunities more quickly. And in many cases, they gain a step on their competitors. So this combination of having a good idea of what you're wanting to do and, proactively setting up some meetings and doing a little bit of homework and balancing that out by being open and receptive is what I would recommend. And then there's a really simple one too, which is just take a lot of meetings. The Finovate is really aimed at executive level decision makers on both sides of the industry. We don't waste your time. There's not lower level sales functionaries in the room in the same way you might find at other larger events. We're more boutique. We're focused on these senior executives. And that means that if you're a banker, you're a decision maker.
More founders, more senior executives.
You're going to talk to the C-suite from the companies who are building stuff, the guys who actually built it themselves. And there's a lot of value in that too. So the more conversations you have, I think the more valuable the show ends up being.
I love that. That's awesome. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about, getting the most out of Finovate if you are a startup, which I know is a pretty big section of the attendees. So for an early stage company with, maybe two people working there, a handful of customers, what should be the priority, or what should the priority be once they're, on site, right? The demo stage, the booth, what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, well, there's really there's a big fat dividing line between the companies who are ready to get up on stage and the companies who aren't quite there yet. The companies who have something new and exciting to roll out of the shop, those companies can really get the most out of the event by demoing, getting up on stage, showing their solutions to the audience. And one of the things which we really care a lot about is making sure that the companies who are selected to demo, it is an application process, by the way. You do have to submit an application to demo. We kind of look at all the different submissions and then select the companies that we want to invite onto the stage. The companies that get on stage all get the same 7 minutes, the same booth space. So if you're an early stage company and you've got something new to show,
that is not a lot of time.
It is not. Yeah, it goes very quickly from their standpoint, as you can probably imagine. But if you're a 2-person startup and you've got a new idea and you earned your slot on stage, you may very well be on stage next to Visa, next to Adobe, next to these huge companies, and you have the exact same 7 minutes. So it really becomes about the technology at that point, right? It's not about where the technology came from, but it's just showing the audience, here's what I built and here's why I think you should care. If you're an early stage company that's not quite ready to get up on the main stage, there's a couple different programs we have. One is actually new for this fall called Impact. It's a session that's running on Friday, so kind of co-located with Finovate. But that one is really just for these early stage companies. It's a chance for them to connect with venture capitalists. It's a chance for them to hear from other successful founders who've been there and who maybe have lessons to share. The best way to get a 12-month growth plan is to have somebody who messed up a 36-month growth plan come and tell you what you should have done differently. So there's a lot of value in that as well. But we do our best to make the show accessible to these early stage companies because we know that's the future of Finovate. That's the future of fintech as a whole. So for us, making sure that we nurture and support those early stage companies is a really big part of what we're trying to do. And we love to see companies kind of progress through where you met some folks, maybe got a round of seed capital or something along those lines, and then we'll see you on stage, 2 years down the road. It's really satisfying for us when that happens because we know we've been a part of that story and helping that company become somebody who can handle it up on the big stage.
That's so cool. And we're going to talk a little bit about your coaching initiative and how you work with these guys here in a little bit, but I'd like to hear what types of things you've seen after the demo. How do those guys man the booth and get a lot of success out of the booth after they're done presenting? Because they can get swarmed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, assuming all goes well, assuming you nail your 7 minutes on stage and you've kind of piqued the audience's interest, it does frequently happen that a company will come back and have quite a few folks at their booth that they need to try and talk to. And in this instance, there's frequently a limited amount of time that you have to kind of have these conversations, because as soon as that intermission ends, the audience is going to go back into the stage and watch that next demo. So one of the things that is really important for companies to do is to have a good sense of, again, who's your high priority contact, because you may end up with somebody at your booth who's your number one, daydream situation. If I can land this client, if I can have this conversation, that's my next year made. That person can very well be at Finovate. So recognizing who that person is, and if they come to your booth, give that person all the time in the world.
Right.
In most cases, the goal is to try to maximize the number of connections that you can make as efficiently as possible. And so this is a little bit of a skill, but there's resources online that can help with this. But the goal is basically to kind of, shake their hand, look them in the eye, get introduced, and then figure out who they are, talk for maybe 60 to 90 seconds, exchange contact information, make a concrete plan to follow up, and then turn to the next person in the line.
Okay.
And some people, there's always these socially awkward moments. Some people will not be denied. Like I'm going to talk to you for 10 minutes and there's no way that you can stop me from talking to you for 10 minutes.
That's tough.
Most people tend to be able to read between the lines and are also trying to do the same thing. It's about creating the connection. And then when you have more time, more space, you can have a 30-minute conversation, whether that takes place on another day at Finovate, whether that takes place when you get back home to your home office over Teams or Zoom or whatever. The best thing to do in that moment is to just try and create that opportunity for yourself, give yourself that follow-up meeting, and then move on to the next person so
Hit
that
the
you
QR
don't leave
code.
somebody at your booth.
Yeah, hit the QR code with the Calendly link and grab some time to meet.
Exactly. Yep. Again, be focused, be targeted. Finovate is a quick event in many ways, and the more efficiently you can operate yourself, the more you'll be able to get out of it.
Okay. So, one thing that I learned about you, Greg, that I think is so cool is that you actually have a little bit of a theater background in which there's a big emphasis on oration, gesticulating, storytelling, putting together coherent thoughts, and being on stage. All of those skill sets are not necessarily things that founders really focus on, right? A lot of these guys are computer science majors. These are not people with those same skills. You're coaching around 70 of these companies that are coming to demo on stage. What's a common thing that you find yourself trying to get them to do a little better?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, and certainly something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. Early on in my Finovate career, I didn't have really any background in financial technology, and not that many people did back in 2010. But I would go to the Finovate and I would watch these guys up on stage, and I would think, oh man, I'm not really understanding what this person is saying. They'd be using technical jargon, or they'd be talking about things which are really insider knowledge. And for my first probably 2 years or so, I would think of that as a failure on my part, right? A failure from me as a listener in understanding what they were trying to communicate. About 2 years in, I started to kind of switch, and I started thinking, actually, if you're up there for 7 minutes and I don't have even a basic idea of what it is that you're doing, that's not on me. That's a failure on your part up there on the stage. And so at that moment, I really started listening to demos and started trying to figure out, what is the system here? How do you replicate a successful demo? One of the biggest challenges comes from the fact that, let's say, imagine you're a startup founder, you perceive a hole in the industry, a gap somewhere. There's a service not being met, or an opportunity to do something more efficiently, or whatever. And then you go and spend 2+ years, 3 years in some cases, maybe even 10, kind of building out a product that fills that gap, right? That takes advantage of whatever you saw. When you complete that process, that's when you raise your hand and say, okay, I'm done. I've built this thing. Let's go to Finovate. Let's talk it out. What's kind of top of your mind as the founder in that situation is typically, what's the last thing that I built, right? What's that last functionality that I added that kind of made me feel like, okay, I'm ready now. This product is ready. And so many founders approach Finovate demo with that as kind of their mind. I'm going to show all the functionality that I've created, when what they really need to start with is what prompted them to create that company or create that technology in the first place. Going all the way back those 2 years to think, what was the hole that I saw? What was the reason that I spent all this time and energy building this in the first place? And most people, if you kind of prompt them to think about it from that context, they can really quickly remember, oh, right, because there's this inefficiency that deals with the way compliance officers and their subordinates are processing these claims, whatever. But the last thing that you built isn't necessarily that big picture piece. So you just have to kind of revert that thinking, go all the way back and start with your audience and kind of recreate that journey that you were already on. You need to get them to understand, here's the hole.
Yeah, take yourself out of the weeds and take them to the catalyst, take them to the impetus for this thing you built.
Yeah, exactly. And in many cases, this requires a much simpler demo. And then the good thing is that as I talk to these companies about it, many of them are relieved because the task of trying to show everything that you've built in 7 minutes is almost impossible in almost every situation, right? Very few products can be demoed end to end.
You really kind of need like 3-ish hours to really tell the enterprise software story.
Yeah, depending on the technology. I mean, like, some of these tap to pay things, it's a 10-second demo. Boop, and we're done. Great.
Sure, yeah.
Done. That's it. That is not the norm. But if you kind of approach it from the standpoint of, I need to use my time on stage to get the audience to understand the big picture value that I'm creating. I need to show enough of my technology that they believe me, that it's real, that I can deliver on these promises, these claims that I'm making. That's what gets me that next opportunity, that gets them coming to my booth. To my knowledge, it has never happened that somebody has come off stage and a audience member walked up to them and said, "Great job on your demo. I'm ready to sign a contract right now. No further questions." There's always potentially the first time, I guess, but that doesn't happen, right?
No.
And so the end-to-end demo is designed with that outcome. That's not your goal right now. Your goal is to get that person in your booth and they'll say, "Hey, I have some questions. Can you do X or Y or Z for me? Let's have a call later on." And this will start a process that hopefully will culminate in a contract being signed. But recognizing that the demo itself is really just your opportunity to get that person's interest, to connect with them, to establish a conversation. And when you approach it from that standpoint, it takes so much pressure off because you don't have to show everything. You just have to show enough that you make sure you get that next conversation.
Do you feel like you're still taking a lot of founders kind of back to basics on how to do the 7-minute pitch? Or is there enough content in former, Finovate sessions that they can look to where like they kind of get the playbook, or do you really need to go deep with them still?
Oh, I still need to go deep with them. Yeah, there's a lot of content that's out there, no question. I've put some content out. I've got an article series right now that I'm in the middle of with Fintech Futures, our sister publication, where I'm kind of walking through, some best practices around how to create a good talk, a pitch, or a demo specifically. But even though these resources are out there, there's still people who clearly don't want to engage. And partly this is because it's not something that we're taught. Most kids don't get public speaking education in school, right? Your teacher will say, "Here, you got a 5-paragraph essay. Here's how you break it down. You write your introduction, you write your 3-body," that you get this kind of support. When you are given a speech in school, typically it's something like, "Come back in 2 weeks and give me a 10-minute report." And there's no touch point. There's no incremental step. There's no idea like, how do I build this? How do I kind of take my thoughts and arrange them in a way that's going to be accessible to an audience? And that lack of understanding, that lack of kind of giving kids a way to think about it manifests into a lot of grownups who are terrified of public speaking. And in most cases, it's simply because they've never been told how to do it. And that doesn't mean that everybody's going to go and be an amazing orator or even that you're going to like it. But there's specific tools that you can be taught that will help you advance your strategic interests. It's not about entertaining the audience. It's not about being the funniest person on stage. That's my job. I'm the host. And nobody cares if I mess something up because I'm just trying to keep the show moving, right? So I have a lot less pressure on me.
Hey, being the MC, man, that's not easy.
it's a long day, but it's a fun day. But for these companies who get up on stage, you have this critical opportunity to address such a wide number of influential people at the same time. Of
Sure.
course, it's a little bit nerve-wracking. Of course, it's something that's going to make even seasoned speakers' heartbeat a little faster. But if you learn some of these techniques and you systemize it, you can deliver something that you can be proud of. And even if you hate it, I've had companies who got off stage, individual speakers who got off stage, and they're like, I'm never doing that again. And then they have a line at their booth and they're like, well, at least it worked.
Yeah,
at least
maybe it wasn't so bad. Yeah.
maybe I didn't
all,
mess it up as much as I thought I did, because people seem to want to talk to me.
We are our hardest critics, right? Like, we are so hard on ourselves because we're stuck in our head with our brain that's saying all sorts of weird, random things. You and I, we talked about golf, and there's some activities in your life, like, and golf is one of them. Public speaking is another one, where there's certain parts of your brain that you need to just shut down and just focus on this thing you're talking about or doing, in the case of like your fintech company, in which you're the expert on, right? And I'm just curious, what's a common tip you give people who come in with not super great public speaking chops? Is it picture them in their underwear? How do you help bolster their mojo when they're on stage?
There's two ways I'll answer this question. One is a more kind of boring way, but the simple answer is you have to put in a lot of work, right? The best cure for that is to structure it, to take your time and really think about it. What am I trying to get out of this session? How do I structure my 7 minutes in such a way that I make it easy on myself? And if you recognize as a speaker, making it easy for you is making it easy for your audience at the same time, then that kind of gives you this flexibility to say, okay, I'm in control here. I'm the only one talking for the next 7 minutes. It's entirely in my own direction. And I can use that fact to make it easy for myself and steer myself towards those areas that I'm most excited to talk about. So structuring a demo in the right way, looking at it from this high-level standpoint, creating a script, kind of walking through this process tends to demystify it and gets you to a point where you think, okay, now I know what I'm trying to do, and I can just follow these steps and practice. A really interesting practical one for people who get up on stage and find that moment to be a little bit overwhelming when those lights come up. I always tell people at our events, you're on stage, it's elevated stage. If you look at the back of the room, you'll frequently see exit signs above doors back there. If you're on a stage, those exit signs are usually right about eye level. At Finovate, those exit signs are almost exactly on the level of the big cameras we have at the back of the house that takes your video, puts it up on the big screen. If you give your demo to the exit signs, you look over the audience, you can pretend they're not there. You don't make eye contact with any of them, but it looks like you're making eye contact with all of them because you're facing directly into the camera. So you kind of get credit for making eye contact when in reality you're avoiding everybody else. Way better to have your head up and be looking over everybody than to have your head down and be looking under everybody, because that always demonstrates weakness. It shows that you're afraid. So if you're super nervous, look at the exit sign. Count the exit signs. Make sure you're rotating your head side to side. And the audience will think, wow, this person's super calm. They're looking at everybody. And you'll be the only one who knows that you're not actually looking at anyone.
Yeah. The audience can be kind of overstimulating in that as you're scanning from person to person, you have the person who's kind of idle facial assembly when they're understanding and they're having the aha moments, looks very scrutinous, right? And then you have 7 people who are completely checked out on their cell phone showing something to their friend. It's such a myriad of things you're looking at. I love the looking at the back of the room, which also doubles as maintaining eye contact with the cameras.
Yeah, I will also say that our audience tends to be somewhat forgiving and friendly. If you look at the audience members, you will find at least one person who's kind of smiling and nodding encouragingly and being like, hey, you're doing a good job. And so some people like to just kind of check in with that person. Is my smiler and nodder in the third row still involved? Okay, that's confidence boosting. Okay, he's still with me. Let's
place.
Keep it going.
That's my safe place.
Yeah, exactly right.
Have you seen people get up there and like have full-blown panic attacks as well?
It does happen. Yeah, of course. It's one of those things where it is a stressful situation. And so There are people who've had significant brain farts up there. I've also seen people go the other way. I actually had one of my favorite students that I ever coached. I knew that she was really nervous. And we talked about the only way to do this is to build a muscle memory so that you get used to saying it the same way every time, delivering it the same way every time.
Right.
And then you can just kind of run on autopilot. You don't have to consciously think about it. And she came backstage and said, I asked her, how did it feel? And she said, honestly, I feel like I blacked out for the first 90 seconds. And then
Perfect.
I kind of like regained consciousness as I was like, oh my God, it's actually going okay. And I was able to tell her, honestly, the audience had no idea. Like nobody picked up on that. But she in her own head was so stressed out that she wasn't even present for it. So, but of course, there's situations where people lose track of their script or where something unexpected happens. As much as possible, we try to make it easy for all the companies and individuals who participate. But there are people who will just really struggle. And typically the most common thing that I see is actually not a complete freeze, but somebody who starts rambling and then all of a sudden gets that bell at 7 minutes and they're
Time's
not
up.
really close to wrapping up. That's probably the most common thing that I see when somebody wishes they'd done it a little bit better.
Okay. Fair enough. So what about the classic demo crash? I was a demo guy when I worked at Fiserv. I'd be in Arkansas or LA or Boston, whatever. And your demo is down. No one knows, whatever. Have you seen people stick the landing on the presentation even when the tech bottoms out?
Yeah, well, so it is always a possibility, right? And I should preface this by saying, we at Finovate take the AV side really seriously. We're obviously an internet-based live demo show, so we spend more money on internet than you could imagine, and our AV team is really top tier, and we do our best to make sure that there's no kind of hiccups. But occasionally we've seen companies who somebody on their development team pushed out an update that took down the platform as their CEO was about to get up on stage. These kinds of things can happen. And I think what tends to happen from an audience standpoint is these demos tend to be noticeable, right? They kind of stick in the audience's memory. And it's up to you on stage to determine, are you going to remember me for a good reason or a bad reason? And companies who are able to handle that moment with grace can typically see a significant boost in their traffic at their booth because people want to come and see what they didn't get to see during the demo. In that moment, the only real thing you can do is to emphasize the high-level value proposition style messages. Make sure that the audience understands what they should be seeing. If you can do it with grace, you can get a little bit of sympathy from the audience. Sure. And then hopefully at the booth, you have an opportunity to show what you were working on. I will also say Finovate is designed to be a slightly harsh format. It is a sink or swim demo environment. And as much as we want every company to get up on stage and do a really good job, we put them on there because we believe they're able to do a good job. There is an element of, if your demo doesn't work, then maybe you aren't quite at that place that you should be to be reaching out to these customers yet. You ask someone in the financial arena, does your technology work? And they say, yeah. And if you're a bank, does it work 100% of the time? Is a really different question, right? This is not other areas of Silicon Valley. In finance, it has to be 100%. And so that's kind of what Finovate is designed to replicate. Does it work in this environment? Does it work when the chips are down? Do you have this confidence in it? We have way, way, way more success stories than companies that implode. But there are people who go to NASCAR to watch the crashes. And there are people who come to Finovate because they like to see some of these companies struggle. It's not the majority of our audience,
sure,
but it is a critical element of the show and just emphasizes, again, how well the other companies are doing. Yeah. If you never had anything go wrong, you would kind of lose sight of the fact that these are really live demos, that there is this element of risk here. The vast majority of companies get over that hurdle, but every once in a while, it's almost nice to have a reminder that, hey, we're playing for keeps. There's no safety net here. This is a sink or swim environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that takes me in my next question for you here. I was just on the phone with a banker who was telling me I can go to one show a year. That's how our budget works. For somebody who is on the fence about registering, what's one thing you'd like them to kind of keep in their back pocket as they're trying to decide where they're going to go.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's no shortage of fintech events, right? And it feels like every year there's another 3 or 4 that come out, and every year there's another 3 or 4 that kind of quietly close, is the other less publicized side of the ecosystem. But at Finovate, we really prioritized the decision maker efficiency of our events, and that's who we've aimed it at. So for executive decision makers who don't have time to spend all their every day reading fintech newspapers and looking at what's happening out in the ecosystem, Finovate remains the best place to come and see all these innovations at once. And once you're there, once you see them, you can connect with the people who really can move the business forward. So there are other events that are bigger than us, no question. There's other events that have more of a party atmosphere than we do. We're not in New York because it's an amazing party city. We're there because Wall Street is there. Senior level bankers are there. And we want to make sure that we're catering to those groups. So if you're a decision maker and if you're looking for an opportunity to understand what the industry is doing and figure out how you can benefit, where you need to be making your next move, Finovate's the best place to do that in a really hyper-focused environment. And that's really who we've decided to target. So, we have about 2,000 folks coming to our show in New York. We don't necessarily want it to get a lot bigger than that. If you start to get bigger, you kind of dilute the value. These key attendees become harder to find. Now we have a situation where for most of the folks, you're able to actually connect with other people who are executives. You don't have to turn your name tag around as you walk through the trade show floor because you're going to get just hassled and hassled and hassled. Yeah. You can wear it proudly. People can come up to you and pitch you ideas, and you may actually have ideas to pitch back to them. So at the end of the day, obviously the demos are a really big part of how we do that, but the end goal is to really facilitate these highly efficient, highly powerful conversations and make sure that everybody who comes, spends 2 or 3 days with us, leaves with a pretty substantial ROI.
One other thing I would throw in there for anybody who's thinking about going, and as someone who's gone to Finovate in the past, that I would recommend thinking about is, a lot of these are new companies. And so the people that are interested in new companies tend to be enterprising people that are builders, and they're trying to do cool, new, challenging things within their institutions. And so that's who you're going to be around when you go to the show. And when you put together your presentation and your takeaways from the event and present it to your leadership at your institution, I think there are a lot of really valuable conversations that are going to take place.
I feel like this is the moment where I should mention that we also have a discount code set up for any listeners here.
Oh, yeah.
The code Propagate20 will save you 20% off of your ticket if you register using that code. So if you're on the fence, maybe that 20% off discount might help nudge you off as well.
Awesome. Yeah, no, appreciate that. And we'll put that in the show notes. Well, Greg, thanks so much for being on the show. Where can people learn more about Finovate and get in touch with you directly?
So Finovate.com is your home for all things Finovate. You'll actually find demo videos from all of the previous Finovates at Finovate.com up there. Myself directly, you can find me on LinkedIn. Greg Palmer, if you search Greg Palmer Finovate on LinkedIn, you hope would find me. That's the best way to reach out. Or you can always email me, greg@finovate.com. Certainly not a secret. I've had that email address for long enough now that I know several thousand people have it. So if you want to drop me a note, I'm happy to say hi.
And then are you available to help fintechs, maybe with some coaching, some presenting, some storytelling outside of your involvement with Finovate?
Yeah. So obviously everybody who comes to a Finovate event, the coaching is included. It's part of the experience to make sure that you're ready for that stage. If you're working on a different kind of speech or need guidance on a pitch, I do that kind of thing as well. Again, reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can talk it through. But it's something that I've certainly seen my share of horrible pitches and horrible demos, and anything I can do to stop that from being your experience. This is one of my primary motivators right now. So always happy to help work with companies and individuals who are excited to get up on stage and really want to make the most out of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.